The most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance, in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in their own direction, have hitherto harmed us little, but someday the piecing together of those dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein that we shall either go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age. Theosophers have suggested at the awesome grandeur of the cosmic cycle therein our world and the human race form transient incidentals. They have hinted at strange survivals in terms which would freeze the blood, if not masked by a bland optimism. But it was not from them that came the single glimpse of forbidden eons, which chills me when I think of it, and maddens me when I dream of it. That glimpse, like all dread glimpses of truth, flashes out of an accidental piecing together of separate things. In this case, an old newspaper item and the notes of a dead professor. I hope that no one else will accomplish this piecing out. Certainly, if I live, I shall never knowingly supply a link in so hideous a chain. I think the professor, too, intended to keep silent regarding the part he knew, and that he would have destroyed his notes had not sudden death seized him. My knowing of things began in the winter of 1926 to 27, with the death of my great-uncle, George Gamal Angel, Professor Emeritus of Semitic Languages at Brown University, Providence, Rhode Island. Professor Angel was widely known as an authority on ancient inscriptions, and had frequently been resorted to by the heads of prominent museums, so that his passing at the age of 92 may be recalled by many. Locally, interest was intensified by the obscurity of the cause of death. The professor had been stricken whilst returning from Newport boat, falling suddenly, as witness said, after being jostled by a nautical-looking gentleman who had come from one of the queer dark courts on the precipitous hillside, which formed a shortcut from the waterfront to the deceased's home in William Street. Physicians were unable to find any visible disorder, but concluded after perplexing debate that some obscure lesion of the heart, induced by the brisk ascent of so steep a hill by so elderly a man, was responsible for the end. At the time I saw no reason to dissent from this dictum, but lately I am inclined to wonder, and more than wonder. As my uncle's heir and executor, for he had died a childless widower, I was expected to go over his papers with some thoroughness, and for that purpose moved his entire set of files and boxes to my quarters in Boston. Much of the material I correlated will be later published by the American Archaeology Society, but there was one box which I found exceedingly puzzling, and which I felt much adverse from showing to other eyes. It had been locked, and I did not find the key until it occurred to me to examine the personal ring which the professor carried always in his pocket. Then, indeed, I succeeded in opening it, but when I did, so seemed only to be confronted by a greater and more closely locked barrier. For what could be the meaning of a queer clay bas-relief and the disjointed jottings and ramblings and cuttings which I found? Had my uncle, in his later years become incredulous of the most superficial impostures. I resolved to search out the eccentric sculptor responsible for this apparent disturbance of an old man's peace of mind. The bas-relief was a rough rectangle, less than an inch thick, and about 5 by 6 inches in area, obviously of modern origin. Its designs, however, were far more modern in atmosphere and suggestion, for although the vagaries of Cubism and Futurism are many and wide, they do not often reproduce the cryptic regularities which lurk in prehistoric writing. And writing of some kind the bulk of these designs seems certainly to be, though my memory, despite much familiarity with the papers and collections of my uncle, failed in any way to identify this peculiar species or even hint at its remotest affiliations. Above all these apparent hieroglyphics was a figure of evidently pictorial intent, though its impressionistic execution forbade a very clear idea of its nature. It seemed to be some sort of monster, or symbol representing a monster, of a form which only a diseased fantasy could conceive. If I say that my somewhat extravagant imagination yielded simultaneous pictures of an octopus, a dragon, and a human caricature, I shall not be unfaithful to the spirit of the thing. A pulpy, tentacle head surmounted a grotesque and scaled body with rudimentary wings, but it was the general outline of the thing which made it most shockingly frightful. Behind the figure was a vague suggestion of a cyclopean architectural background. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please do not thank me. Thank Ada, Molinai, Valmont, Jolly Joe Star, Dark Griever, and all my wonderful and generous patrons, without whom I would not be able to dedicate the resources and time I do to all my channels. I can never thank them enough. I hope you will join me again, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.